Perfectly imperfect. Perfectly imperfect is a term that I came up with as I looked in the Bible. I realized there are tons of stories of people that we've heard of throughout history, who God has used to impact the world in some way for Him, and as it's so often it's easy for us to look at people in the Bible and just assume that they've got their lives together, that they did the right things to make God want to use them, that made God want to work with them and be with them. And as we look at those types of people and really read the stories of the Bible and understand who these people were and what they did, where they came from in life, what their life experiences were, it quickly becomes evident that these people were not perfect. You know, these people had really screwed up lives. They went through a lot of different things where they didn't follow God. They blatantly disobeyed Him in some cases, but God still chose to use these people for His glory, for His will. I think it's really important to look at some of these people's stories and understand who they were and where they came from. So as we look at them, it helps us to understand that God can use us as well. Even though we're not perfect, even though we don't have what we think it might take for God to use us, God still can use us because He's used these other people as well.
Can't be perfect.
And actually, one of the first people we get introduced to in the Bible is a guy named Abraham. And we meet Abraham when he's about 75 years old, is when the first time God speaks to him. And so you can just imagine that at 75 years of age, he's already kind of set in his ways. He's got a wife. He lives with all of his extended family, his father, his nephew, some of his brothers. He's probably at an age where he's looking to just take it easy and start winding down. And God basically tells him, "Hey, I want you to leave everything. I want you to just leave your father's house and just pack up and go to a place I'm going to show you." I mean, just think about the faith step that he would have to take in that. Abraham could have easily decided that he was too old, that he's too set in his ways to pick up and move and just say, just kind of call God crazy and just be like, you know what, you're crazy. I'm too old for this. I'm 75 years old. I'm just going to stick where I'm at. I'm comfortable in the life that I have. My life's going really good, and I have no reason to just pack up and leave. But he does it. And as I was thinking about examples of people that could easily use the excuse saying that they're too old to do something, I can remember growing up in youth group at my church. There was an older couple that helped out, and it would be really easy for that older couple to say, well, they're just teenagers, and I don't really have anything in common with them, and why would they even want to interact with me? Like, why would teenagers want anything to do with us? We're old, and but really it was the exact opposite. These people had awesome hearts where they really genuinely enjoyed being with us and interacting with us, and because they had this mentality where they wanted to interact with us. They didn't have this "I'm too old" mentality. They were able to allow God to use them, despite what their age was. God still chose to use them, and I know personally I really enjoyed having them there and interacting with them on a weekly basis.
Wanna make you proud.
And one thing we know about Abraham and his family is that they came from pagan worshipers. They worshipped idols and false gods that they made up for themselves. But despite all that, God wants to have a relationship with Abraham, and actually wants to interact with him on a daily basis, and wants to use him to be the father of the nation of Israel. So from day one, Abraham is this guy who doesn't even have a relationship with God, and God calls him to leave his family and go to a place that he's going to show him. I mean, Abraham's just one of these people that you wouldn't expect God to want to have anything to do with. I mean, so often we expect God only wants to use us, or only wants to have a relationship with us, or have anything to do with us if we have our lives perfectly together and figured out. Really, and that couldn't be less true, because despite his imperfections, despite the fact that Abraham is a pagan worshiper, God still chose to use him and still wanted to interact with him and build a relationship with him, because God doesn't wait for us to be these perfect people who have their lives together to interact with us and to begin working in us and using us. He uses us while we're still imperfect, while we're still not quite there, while we still don't have everything figured out, because he can still use our imperfections to fulfill his perfect will. So not only did God promise Abraham that he was going to be able to go to this new land and inhabit it, he went a step further and said, you know what, I'm going to give you offspring, and your offspring are going to become numerous as the sands. And so just think about that. You know, Abraham is 75 years old, and God's promising him kids. Like, you know, in our culture today, that's ludicrous to think of somebody that old having kids, and even then it seemed like a ridiculous plan, a ridiculous idea for Abraham to be able to have kids. But what's really interesting about that is that at first Abraham doesn't really seem to question it, and in fact it's almost like it's something, it's good news to him, because it's something that he and his wife have longed for. Him and his wife have tried to have kids, and to this point in their life they didn't, and in some cases maybe they gave up hope in thinking that this would happen for them. His son Isaac is finally born from Sarah when Abraham is 100 years old. Like, God finally blessed him after about 25 years. And so often we think that in order for God to use us, that it has to be done in a time frame that makes sense to us. You know, we try to put limits on what God can do because we see our own flaws. Like, we have limitations, and because we have limitations, we just assume that God's working within those limitations. But the awesome thing is that God is so much bigger than our limitations. God is so much bigger than our imperfections. And God doesn't really care about our limitations. He's bigger than all of that, and more powerful than all of that. And nothing really is impossible for God. I mean, if God can allow a 100-year-old man and woman to have a child that he promised them, then what more things could God do for you? And God chose to use Abraham even though he was too old. But Abraham was perfectly imperfect for God, and so are you.